Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
So big topic tonight, but also pretty straightforward. Last week we unpacked the four attributes to true origins of dukkha. So within the four measurable, no, get my language right, four noble truths, we had the four attributes of each four noble truths. So we had the four attributes of true dukkha, suffering in the sense that we used to think of it. We had the four attributes of true origins of dukkha. So the origins, the real cause of our conditioned existence in samsara. And if we recall, though it arises from misunderstanding, misperception of ourselves, that manifests in a way of craving and karma and the conditioning that arises. That creates this whole cycle. Today we'll get to true cessation. And that is the radical, real radical finding of the Buddha. Said basically, we can be free of all this. We can attain nirvana. We don't have to be stuck in a conditioned existence. And that is something that is uniquely Buddhist. Pretty much everything else that we talk about in Buddhism, you can find just, in most research and terms of Aristotle, Plato, ancient wisdom traditions, ancient wisdom, modern Western psychology. A lot of this stuff we can find. It's essentially just establishing the nature of our experience and how we interact with it and how we create suffering and happiness and well-being and struggle. A lot of that pretty universal, even though we're stuck in the middle of it. But what makes Buddhism very radical is that we can be free of it. It's unnecessary. It's all a big misunderstanding. And that's nirvana, that's liberation. So herein lies with these four attributes, these aspects of cessation. And the main point is not to get confused. It's pretty easy to confuse states of well-being with liberation or freedom, peace, and well-being in a sense of a conventional way that we live. But these really point out what it is to be absolutely liberated. And the idea here is that if we understand them, we reflect upon them, they make sense to us, then we're not going to get very confused between a temporary state of liberation for a period of time versus actual nirvana, actual liberation. So that's the intro. All right. Let's get to the text. So lots of fours, right? Four noble truths, four attributes, each of the four noble truths. The four attributes of true cessations. Now, I'm just going to skip a couple pages here, because the first couple is really dealing with some technicality in terms of a particular view of prasangika, which would be the middle way path of Madhyamaka within a Tibetan lineage versus some of the other ones. And here we always want to, where do we approach this from our own perspective as human beings, and what's the universal understandings here? So go a couple of paragraphs, then we get right to the global description. The four attributes of true cessation address concerns that you may have. I'm curious if you have any of these concerns. If you believe that afflictions exist inherently in sentient beings, so that a state of final peace is impossible, then we reflect on the first attribute. So, is that a concern you might have? That these afflictions, we hear it all the time. Well, you're only human. Oh, I'm only human. And by being human, we have these afflicted states, part of being human. Aging, sickness, death, struggle, worry, fear, insecurity, all those things. Pretty human. And so if we have that view that, well, this is just the way it is, then the direction is let's really look at this first attribute. So that's the core. And then the next one is, if you wonder if heaven is better than nirvana, contemplate the second attribute. So interesting to note, a lot of people don't realize this. Buddhists have heaven and hell, just like Christians. Difference is it's temporary, and you don't stay there forever. And we could have a hell realm right here in the human body. I mean, just think about, maybe what's going on in Ukraine, or someone who's been trafficked in prison and sold, for their whole life. And there's lots of types of hell we could experience through a lifetime in a human body. And there's also some pretty amazing pleasure realms that some people get to experience with very little suffering at all the resources they could want, and so forth. So that's even possible in a human body. But, when this body dies, a heaven realm, an experience like that, or a hell realm, some, pretty horrific experiences. We might have a mind that, especially with a Judeo-Christian background, going one way or the other, or we might just have a mind that we're going to be punished. We don't do good, good karma, bad karma, and all that. The distinction here is that from a Buddhist perspective, none of those are going to last. Right? This human body is not going to last. Wind up in a heaven realm, not going to last. Hell realm, not going to last. So if you're going to hell, that's good news. Heaven, not so good, because that won't last either. And so if someone has a belief system around heaven and hell, life after death, then this would be relevant here. And it's important to remember that in these Eastern philosophies, rebirth is just like water, there's water, there's air. Of course you're reborn. That's the way they're born. And, the culture and everything about it. So it's just very natural. In the West, very different view. A lot of people can't even wrap their head around the idea that there might be something after this body. And so may not be worrying too much about that. So it just depends where you're at. But the idea is a lot of people want to get to, a nicer realm, heaven realm, nicer way of being. And if that is better than complete liberation, that would be a mistaken view. And the second attribute is relevant there. If you think that nirvana isn't total freedom, reflect on the third attribute. And that's a huge thing, actually. Find it in some of the text of some modern teachers. And if you wonder if it's possible for nirvana to deteriorate, contemplate the fourth attribute. The four attributes of true cessation are cessation, peace, magnificence, and definite emergence, freedom. So if you just think about it, it's basically, here's the qualities of true cessation. This is the way it is. And anything short of that is not that. this becomes really relevant, especially in terms of a lot of teachings that have shown up. And people, as we mentioned, for those of you at the retreat on Sunday, that will literally tell you they're enlightened as they kick their dog and get frustrated or have insecurity or ego problems. All those would be afflictions. So, am I really enlightened, or have I had some experiences of realizations which I've gained? So that's why this becomes more relevant in terms of here's the attributes of what it is to be totally free of all this, and not to confuse it with some of the things that really get presented quite frequently. So let's take a look at the first one. So nirvana is the cessation of dukkha because it is a state in which the origins of dukkha have been abandoned. And it thus ensures that dukkha will no longer arise. Thinking that afflictions are an inherent part of sentient beings, some people believe that trying to eliminate them is futile. They do not try to remedy their situation, consequently continue to be reborn in cyclic existence. Understanding that attaining true cessations is possible by eliminating afflictions and karma dispels the misconception that liberation does not exist, immediately freeing us from a defeatist and often cynical attitude. So it's pointed out here that if we reflect upon and understand what it means to dispel karma, to dispel the origins of my suffering, and we understand cause and effect, if there's no cause, there can't be an effect. Well, you're going to get some clarity around, well, if I've eliminated all the causes for this, there can't possibly be a result. What they don't tell you is how to do all that. So, right here, what's being presented is the framework from a Buddhist perspective, from the teaching of Buddha, that this is the quality of that. That doesn't mean that we sit here and go, okay, good, true cessations, we can be free of this. There's nothing to do with being human and the afflictions, and we can all do this. Because you might not believe that, there's not much faith there. We're very human, we have these experiences. So much of our journey in this will be to test that hypothesis. Do I test first these afflictions I have as a human, are they inherently human? And so let's take a look at some of our afflictions. Can I eliminate some of them or not? Do you have all the same afflictions I do as a human? Or not? So we might be able to start doing some research there. Oh, you know what? There's some afflictions I don't have today that used to be very predominant in my life. But I don't have them so much anymore. So they're temporary and permanent. Some of my friends have some afflictions I don't have. And we're both human. But then we get to some that kind of we're stuck with. Are we all aging, sickness, and death? Yeah, it's pretty human. Okay. Okay. So maybe inherent in human form is birth, aging, sickness, and death. Seems pretty inherent. So we want to reflect on that. Then we start thinking, well, is human inherent? Then that's a bigger question. We start thinking, well, okay, I'm in a human form, as a human form. Do people all age and have sickness and everything at the same level, the same degrees? No. Okay, so there's some variation there. And then when we start getting into the previous origins of dukkha, the big misperception is I perceive myself as John, as human, and really identify myself in a way that I don't exist. Hence, all the conditions and causes for being in a human form. So then we have to kind of track even prior to inherently human and just think about life and consciousness and explore those things. So it's to look deeply, what's the cause of our birth? What's the cause of our existence? Are these things inherent in all humans? And am I actually just John in this body as a human? Or is there more to me? So the Buddha would say, yeah, you're just stuck thinking you're human. And Tenzin Priyadarshi would say, to say that you're only human is nothing but a self-imposed limitation. Yeah. Whoa. And so are you the awareness that sees itself as human? So these are all things we explore, and they're not things that, oh, I read it here, this is the way it is. Yeah, maybe you are human, and it's all human, and that's all we got. And we die, and that's it. Just because I read this in a book somewhere doesn't mean it's any different. How do I know? And so that's the approach with Buddhism is we need to test, we need to check things out, we need to probe. And there's no benefit of this blind faith movement. Blind faith doesn't get us very far in terms of when we need the effort to move through some of our obstacles. Certainty is going to give us that strength. So as we had a bit of a talk at the retreat on Sunday about just being realistic about where we are. And it is perfectly okay to be in a Buddhist teaching, applying Buddhist principles, wanting to be a good human and suffer less and have more joy in your life. I think most humans are probably around there who come to a Buddhist teaching. They might have an idea or fantasy about, wouldn't it be nice to be a Buddha and be free of all this? But that can seem very unattainable. And that's okay. It's far better to be realistic and go, these Buddhist teachings help me be a better human, suffer less, have more joy, be less caught up in a lot of mental afflictions, and I have more peace and ease in my life. And as I engage in my ethical behavior, I reap the benefits of that. And if there's a good next life or something beyond this, I think I'm doing pretty good if that happens. Pretty reasonable approach. And it's much more beneficial to be where we're at. And then along those lines, being reasonable, how do I know there isn't more than this? I don't really have any proof that there isn't. So why not hold that lightly? Why not hold that lightly? It's just as irrational to eliminate something I have no evidence to eliminate. Well, why would I do that? I don't know. So being where we're at, testing the teachings, then we might arrive at a place where we get some experience that leads us to, oh, you know what? Actually, I am seeing cessation. I've met someone who seems like that. For example, having met the Dalai Lama, seeing someone in a very different way of being, or my own personal experience of watching my teacher go through a death process with my own eyes and watch what happens when the body doesn't deteriorate, and when they do all the things that you're taught and you actually see it with your own eyes, and it's kind of like, okay, that's everything that I guess you told me back in 2005, who described exactly, I saw it with my own eyes. Well, okay, that might happen, might not happen. So being where we are is laying a foundation for the potential. If we discover more, we discover more. No downside to being a good human who operates ethically and doesn't create causes of suffering and is able to engage in life in ways that are more meaningful and productive. What the point of these four qualities or attributes of cessation is to not have us shut a door and close a path off. Doors open. May or may not be true, I don't know. But I don't want to mistake things in a way that doesn't allow the opportunity if it is true. That kind of makes sense? So here's the teachings. Here's what not to confuse for us to investigate. And at some point, you might get to a point where you think, wow, I actually don't need to do all this. Or you might just be at a point where I have radically transformed my human life and I live with a lot more joy and ease in my life. And the world's a better place because I'm acting this way and I understand my connections to others. I understand interdependence. And I want to use this life well. Not a bad way to be. What's not very helpful is to just blindly move through without checking. Because if we check, then the open door becomes a potential. Or not. But it's the checking that's going to really empower us to have a realization. That's why at the monastery, there's about 8 hours of debate a day. So a lot of debate, back and forth, test. All right. So that's the first attribute of cessation, which, well, it is cessation is what it's called. And though they didn't go deeply into it, I was trying to offer a way that we can start reflecting upon this. If I can eliminate the causes of my afflictions and alter the type of karma, do I change my life? Do afflictions go away? Do I benefit from good karmic imprints? I can test that out. And then we might go a little further and have some faith that I can eliminate all of this. And the point is, it will free us from a defeatist and often cynical attitude. Right? What's that? Contempt prior to investigation kind of thing. Yeah. Why try? Why bother? Human, just be human. Yeah. Life's hard. Suck it up. Quit whining. It's as good as it gets. Every day you're awake, you're closer to your death. Yeah. All that perky talk. And might as well eat ice cream. So it's like, wow, what about potentials? What about a way of being? And what's great is I get to eliminate a lot of my afflictions just now in this life, in this body. And there's something I recognize that I'm always in a state of becoming. I'm not stagnant. I'm not stuck. I'm not this way or that way. I'm always becoming something. All right, second one, Nirvana is peace because it is a separation in which afflictions have been eliminated. And so again, I try to remember to go back and forth between the text. Afflictions means out of peace. So if I'm peaceful and at ease, I'm not afflicted. If I'm excited, I'm now afflicted. If I'm worried, I'm afflicted. Anything out of that state, just peace, tranquility, well-being in a sense, one way or the other, is afflicted in the Buddhist way that they're talking about it. So what they're saying here is affliction is separation from peace. When there's no afflictions, all you have is peace. So the natural state of the mind, even in a conditioned existence, is described as blissful, luminous, and non-conceptual. And that's just us resting in the natural state of our mind without being caught up in a mental cognitive activity in a sense. That's blissful, luminous, non-conceptual. A lot of people get addicted to that sort of blissful state, which will also get addressed here. Unable to correctly identify the qualities of liberation, some people mistake other polluted states, such as meditative absorptions in the form and formless realms, as liberation. Although these meditative absorptions are much more tranquil than our human existence, they have only suppressed manifest afflictions and have not eliminated subtle afflictions and their seeds from the root. Not understanding that nirvana is ultimate peace, people do not try to attain it and are satisfied with a temporary superior samsaric state. This attribute counteracts the belief that states polluted by ignorance are nirvana. People who are convinced of the harm of afflictions and karma know their cessation is a state of peace and joy that will not vanish. And this, I think, is the big, horrific downside. People mistaking description of nirvana, and then they don't try any hard. There's actual teachers, very famous teachers in the West, who have said liberation is not an absence of afflictions. And so guess what? You don't even try for that. What they teach is these meditative absorptions, these states of being. So again, achieving shamatha, blissful, luminous, non-conceptual, some insight practice where I have some non-dual experience and it feels good. I recognize I'm much more than this body. There is no object, subject. You're immersed in this experience, this samadhi. And they'll actually teach that, you know, that's the enlightenment that we're seeking, the liberation, is knowing that in human form. And yet when you're not in those states, you can still be insecure or resentful or arrogant, or, you know, all those afflictions are still possible in between those states. And then, well, if you think that's that, then what the whole goal is to minimize those. Get better at your meditation states and do it more frequently. And, you know, basically, you won't ever be totally free, but you'll be free a lot. And that's the best you got. So more than one pretty famous teacher have said things like that. And then the downside is, well, then you don't even, you know, you think you got it. So this point would counteract that tendency. And again, there's nothing wrong with those other states. Just, I guess my critique would be, don't call it liberation. You know, call it deep realization experiences that are temporary. But the actual definition of liberation is cessation that lasts. You never have to go back. You never have to have those afflictions again. You are free. You know who you are. You perceive directly and immerse yourself in the ultimate nature of your experience as it exists and as you exist. And there's no need to be confused and create karma and be stuck and have those afflictions. So it's good to keep that in mind when you hear some Buddhist teachings. I say that. Yeah, you're selling yourself short. When, again, I think it's just totally okay to say, well, this is the best that we've gotten so far, and this is what we're sharing. But why would you say you can't do something more? Just because you haven't done it or met someone who has. I'm a little passionate about that. Anybody notice a little bit? Not naming names. Okay. But the last sentence, people who are convinced of the harm of afflictions and karma know that their cessation is a state of peace and joy that will not vanish. In other words, as long as we have some, we know we have work to do. We just have some more work to do. Third attribute, Nirvana is magnificence because it is the superior source of benefit and bliss. Because Nirvana is completely non-deceptive and no other state of liberation supersedes it. It is supreme and magnificent. Nirvana is total freedom from all three types of dukkha. Knowing this prevents mistaking certain states of temporary or partial cessation as nirvana. It also prevents thinking that there is some state superior to the cessation of dukkha and its origins. Someone who mistakes a samsaric state as liberation will follow a detour that does not lead to their destination. For example, someone who enjoys the tranquility of suppressing the conceptual mind in blank-minded meditation does themselves a disservice because nirvana will elude them. And so again, it's very similar to what I've just been speaking to, is that some people can get very blissed out, maintain a stability, get really caught up in, this was blank stated type meditation, which is tricky business, actually. Achieving shamatha. So if someone were to achieve shamatha, just so we know, there's 9 levels of shamatha, and as you work your way through, achieving shamatha would be this final piece, is you have no sense consciousness anymore. All the sense consciousness have dissolved into just pure, what we call this natural state of mind. Alan Wallace calls it substrate consciousness. So what we mean by that, sense consciousness would be eyes, I can see, hearing, I can hear, touch. All those sense consciousness you wouldn't be aware of anymore. They all are dissolved. And you're just resting in the natural state of mind, your consciousness, substrate consciousness. So you're not aware of your body, you're not aware of those things. You're really immersed in just a state of your mind. And so no form, no any of that. And again, described as blissful, it feels great. It's pure awareness, it's luminosity, it's just illuminates. And it's non-conceptual, there's no subject object, or we don't have concepts. So that's obviously a pretty helpful state, good to do. We want to achieve shamatha. But that will not enlighten you. Okay. There is no karma you're creating. It's an ethically neutral state. So you're not creating negative karma, not necessarily positive. It's just this state of being that's natural. It's your natural state of being in the mind. And so at that point, it's what they're talking about, kind of suppressing, not really suppressing in the sense that you're not eliminating any of your karmic seeds, and you're not eliminating any of the seeds of affliction. You're just not engaging with them. Come out of that meditation, and here I am. I like Lama Allen's description. It's like a timeout in a game you're already losing, right? You were 20 points down when you went in. You come out, you're still 20 points down, right? But you didn't lose any more points either, right? We didn't create any. And so the Buddha's big development and what made his awakening possible, his big innovation, was to achieve shamatha. And once you have that technology of awareness and the ability to direct your attention where you'd like it and hold it there without effort, then you engage in vipassana meditation, the insight meditation, probing who is it that's aware? Who is it that's aware? Am I this body? Am I this? And with that degree of mental capacity, you can immerse yourself in the insight meditations, the vipassana. And all those realizations that you get and insights you get, you can hold that attention and saturate your mind, which allows that realization to drench your whole being, and do it again and again and again, holding it there, holding it there, holding it there, to where the realizations become the reality, and you're free. And so that was his big innovation. Shamatha is it's not the deepest level of samadhi. If you go too far, then you can't do the conceptual in the vipassana, because you've lost all conceptual mind. But if you back it up to the first jhana, sit in shamatha, you can bring a thought and utilize it. So you kind of have to back up a little bit instead of just going to all the jhanas. And so that was his big innovation. He had this thought. He'd done all the jhanas, he'd done all the samadhi, he'd done all that, and he realized this is not the answer. This is, not liberation. And then he had this realization about that one stage that we know today as shamatha, the first jhana access. And he thought, maybe that's the way. And so he took that and he combined it with vipassana meditation. And that is the whole Buddhist thing, is shamatha, vipassana, freedom. Yeah, the whole answer, pretty cool. Achieving shamatha, a little bit of work. But yeah. So yeah, that's the big innovation that he had. Everybody else just kept doing the deeper levels of meditation. But it's really that combination. And so that's what happens with a lot of vipassana meditation. You get a little insight, it feels good for a bit, but you can't sustain it without the shamatha. You need to be able to sustain it. But people get caught up in shamatha and they think they're enlightened, and they just do that a lot, but that won't get it. That was the point being made there. And the fourth attribute, nirvana, is freedom or definite emergence, because it is total, irreversible release from samsara. So you never come back. I mean, it's total. Nirvana is a definite abandonment because it is irrevocable. It is an irrevocable release from samsara's dukkha. This counters the mistaken notion that nirvana can degenerate and you find yourself back. Because nirvana is the elimination of all afflictions and karma causing samsara rebirth, there no longer exists any cause for such rebirth or the suffering it entails. Contemplating these four attributes encourages us not to stop part way, but to continue practicing until we actualize full nirvana. So, coming back to, well, how does this help us today? And, my analogy is always, it's nice to have kind of a direction and map of the world, right? I'm not in Germany, but I kind of know where it is. And I specifically know where a little island in the Mediterranean is I used to enjoy. So I know where it is, not there yet. I also know how to get there. And so as we go through these Four Noble Truths, as we go through the teachings, our main practices are going to be relevant to where we are. But it's nice to have the directions, the tour guide book, the map. Like, this is how it works. This is what we found. And the Buddha basically was describing his experience, what he found. And then we can have our guidebook, take our little detours, check this out, stop here, and apply these practices. And then we might go a little further down the path a little bit. And then these other practices might become more relevant. But the baseline for all of it is ethics, concentration, and wisdom. If we can remember that, everything can be the path. So we're not into the truth of the path yet. That's next week. But the three categories of that path is ethics, concentration, wisdom. So with good ethics, good karma, good behavior, we are going to create the conditions and the resultant karma. Concentration, that's where I get to start training my mind, taming my mind. And so good shamatha practice, like we just had a little 15-minute one, start taming the mind. And so I can tame my mind not just in meditation. I can, as I come into the world, really be working with my reactivity, and I can start taming my mind, not being as hooked or triggered. And wisdom is starting to identify more accurately how I exist, how my feelings arise, and how I'm experiencing people and events and things. We can be doing that every day, right? I can get a little wiser every day. I can recognize impermanence daily. There's wisdom. I can recognize that that person's not the cause of my frustration. They're just triggering frustration within me. My frustration is actually arising from my own side, my own feelings, my own thoughts about how that person should be. And the seeds of my frustration is within me, not them. So that's wisdom. Concentration is going to help me, but I can also do lots of mindful things during the day. And so there's some opportunity there. So the path of liberation is based in ethics, concentration, wisdom. So we can be doing the path all the time. And guess what? If you're a normal human being, your life will get better as you act in more ethical ways that you feel good about and good about who you are. And the more you tame your mind, the less reactive you'll be, and you'll be able to respond more appropriately. Won't be a prisoner of every little impulse or fear that pops up. And apparently with more wisdom, I'm going to suffer less, because I can actually start avoiding the thinking errors and the misperceptions and the labeling and the projections that I put on the world. And so that's the thing I find most beautiful about this path, is it really begins where we are. It improves our life now, and it unfolds. Right now we're getting the whole map of complete freedom. But right now it could be a little section in that tour book of our particular area. Places to see, places to avoid. Here's a 5-star mental attitude. There's a 1-star habit to avoid. Yeah, let's not go there. And in that way, we're getting the whole guidebook, but we start to use the ones in our area. What a great metaphor! I was thinking that. Almost makes you want to look for a restaurant. Okay. So I'll pause there, see if anyone has any questions or comments, anything that came up. So let's go ahead and dedicate the merit that we have cultivated from our time together. Taking just a moment to recognize that there are so many people that can use some help, and everything we're doing for ourselves puts us in a better position to be helpful. The way we engage in the world does make a difference. And for those of you who care to, you can join me in dedication. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, and I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu